Hello travelers, Boardman21 here, and today's build is Foe's Nova Boy. This build goes back several patches, and it's been just as strong as ever in the most recent patch. It can go 400, 500, 600 waves. It's consistently pushed there every patch for Foe, and it does take some skill to play it. It is a high actions per minute build. It's not just an auto casting build. Not even Flame Ward will be on auto casting, but this video is just to do a covering of it, to shed more light on the build, to give some more deep explanation that maybe you haven't even heard of it, or maybe you're not on the forums and haven't seen it. It'll also come with several build planners. This will be able to allow you to build it several ways. One way won't include the rare unique Orion's Eye, so that if you don't have that, you don't have to worry about it. You can work around it. I'll show you what you would want to craft on an amulet instead. And the other build planners, there will be a two-handed build planner, there will be a one-hander and a catalyst build planner, and then of course there'll also be a build planner that shows if you use the unique prison wraps, or if you decide to craft a chest instead, we can show you what you would want to use. Alright, let's go ahead and get into the skills, the interactions, and just how this build works. For skills, I'm running Elemental Nova, Flame Ward, Focus, Lightning Blast, and Teleport. For Elemental Nova, this will be your main source of damage, especially against groups, whereas Lightning Blast will be your single target killer. For Elemental Nova, we have it set up for full lightning. We're going to be doing channeling with it so we can get many attacks per second. We're going to have high base crit chance, and then we're also going to have the spark charges. So we got 1 point in Lightning Nova, 5 points in Spark Charges, allows for a 100% chance with every hit you do that it's going to apply a Spark Charge that after 0.7 seconds it will then go off, and it has a small AoE as well. It's also lightning damage, so it scales really well with the build. 5 points in Elemental Expanse for increased area, 3 points in Charge Destruction for that increased base critical strike chance. 1 point in Luminaire turns it into a channeling skill, so now instead of you manually casting it, it will now attack 5 times per second. And then 5 points in Arcane Elemortorium for that increased damage and increased area. For Flame Ward, we have this set up to take less elemental damage, to take less damage from hits, and to have multiple charges so that you can use it when you're really in trouble. We got 3 points in Dilation, 1 point in Infusion, 1 point in Lightning Ward, 2 points in Star Ward Defense, 5 points in Barrier for that less hit damage, 3 points in Prismatic Buffer for that 30% less elemental damage taken. Now the reason that this is important, and the reason that you don't build into percent of damage absorbed into mana instead of ward, is the fact that we're going to be building into everything being taken is basically elemental damage. Now when you wear Orion's Eye, that's going to convert 100% of all void damage into fire damage. It's also going to reduce the amount of fire damage you take between 10 and 15%. Now that's huge, because that means you don't have to stack any void resist. On top of that, we're going to have the Ashen Crown, which can roll up to 80% of physical damage converted into fire damage as well, so that you won't be taking much physical damage. In fact, you can ignore physical resistance, or at least not have to cap it, as long as you get a decent roll on an Ashen Crown. And then there's also poison resistance, which you don't ever have to get because poison's easily avoidable, which means the only affixes, the only resistances that you actually have to stack is necrotic and elemental. And elemental, you can get a lot of that, almost all of it, just inside of your skill trees or when you teleport. And then also on top of that, necrotic is easily gotten with just 2 rings. So that's what we'll be building into to save all of our prefix and suffix for other things that we need. Now we are building this with charges so that you can use it, multiple times in a row if you need. So we've got 1 point in Desperate Defense, 1 point so that we are going to automatically cast it if we get stunned. This is very helpful because when you're stunned, it's going to happen almost instantly, and when you're stunned, that's usually when you take the most damage, so this helps protect you. 2 points in Fuel the Flames, and then 1 point in Dual Aegis for that extra charge. For Focus, this is how you're going to be to get your mana back, and you're really just taking advantage of taking less elemental damage while it's active, having extra armor, and then of course using that burst and trying to get as much mana back as fast as possible. We got 4 points in Revelation, 1 point in Energy Infusion, 4 points in Mana Flooded, 1 point in Desperate Meditation, 1 point in Resolute Stance. 5 points in Prismatic Stance makes you take 25% less elemental damage while it's active. and 4 points in Iron Stance for that 400 flat armor while you are channeling focus. For Lightning Blast, this will be the single target killer, so if you're just going up against something with a lot of life, a boss, whatever, Lightning Blast is going to be what you want to cast, as it's going to do more damage than Elemental Nova will. You got 2 points in Storm Razor, 2 points in Lightning Attunement. Now this will also give you Lightning Aegis, which increases your lightning damage and can reduce damage you take. So this is also one reason just to cast Lightning Blast every now and then, just to make sure that you have this, especially if you're anticipating large amounts of damage or a hard enemy coming into view or into the battle. 4 points in Overcharge, 1 point in Hypercharge, 2 points in Chain Lightning, 1 point in Convergence, 3 points in Arcing Power, 2 points in Crackling Speed, and 3 points in Shatter Shock for that extra damage against chilled or shocked enemies, which you'll have all of the time. If you have extra points for Lightning Blast, you want to cap out that Arcing Power before you cap out the Chain Lightning, because this will give you additional chains, but the difference between them is this one's going to increase the mana cost, and this one's just going to give you more chains as long as you've been spamming it a lot. And then for Teleport, we've got 4 points in Resonant Plasma, 4 points in Elemental Affinity, 1 point in Elemental Dawn, 1 point in Elemental Dusk, and 1 point in Elemental Midnight. We also have 4 points in Crystalline Passage and 5 points in Time Dilation for that 100% increased duration of buffs. Now, the buff lasts 4 seconds normally. This will bump it up to 8. So as long as you teleport once every 8 seconds, you're going to have extra armor, stun avoidance, and then more elemental resist, which should already be capped. But this way, if you are short on elemental resist, as long as you teleport every 8 seconds, you'll be able to cap those out, because this is going to give you 20% cold and then 20% fire and lightning, along with that 200 stun avoidance and 200 armor. So having 20% extra resistances mean you, as long as you plan on teleporting once every 8 seconds, you would actually only have to get your elemental resistances up to 55%. A side note, the reason that there are no decoys taken on this build is because they can be distracting. Now, while they are nice to take away the taunt or the aggro or just be distracting for the enemies, they can also distract you if you're really trying to cap out this build and go high in the arenas, because they can cast spells like Ice Vortex on the ground that can confuse you between them doing damage to the enemies or enemies trying to do damage to you, which could cause you to run a different way than you would have, which could end up getting you killed. But if you like the decoys, you can definitely build into them. I would recommend taking out of the extra duration, because you can teleport every 3-4 seconds. There's no need for 8-second buffs if you plan on teleporting plenty. So a couple points out of here is perfectly fine to put into the decoys if you'd like to run it that way. For passives, I've got 28 points in the Mage base class, with 5 points in Elementalist, 8 points in Arcanist, 5 points in Mage Flurry, and 10 points in Knowledge of Destruction. For Spellblade, we got 6 points, and all of that is to increase your elemental resistance. So all of those will go into elemental affinity. This also increases your elemental damage, which you have lightning damage, so it helps there as well. And then 79 points in the Mastered Sorcerer, with 8 points in Calculated Destruction, 8 points in Brainstorm, 5 points in Arcane Momentum, 8 points in increased lightning damage and shock chance with lightning skills, 5 points in Rift Bolt, 5 points in Snow, 8 points in Crackling Precision, 5 points in Arcane Obliteration, 5 points in Distant Spark, 1 point in Elemental Ascendance, 5 points in Arcane Current, 5 points in Archmage, and 4 points in Recollection, along with the last 2 in Arcane Insight. And then there's also 5 points in Spell Slinger for that extra mana regen and the extra flat spell damage. Now, Recollection is just for the intelligence. That's also going to give you, ward retention. If you don't want to put those points there and you are missing some elemental resistance, you can put points into Elemental Ascendance instead of the Arcane Insight. Same goes with the cooldown, although having that cooldown for teleport is really nice. For idols, items, and blessings. So for idols, it doesn't matter which build planner you go on or which way you plan on playing. There are best in slot 2x2s that you want to wear, and that's going to be the hybrid increased lightning damage while you have lightning Aegis, and increased lightning damage doubled if you have more than 300 mana. So you will want more than 300 mana, and with these you're able to get almost 200% increased damage with just one of these if you have lightning Aegis on. And because you'll be using Lightning Blast every now and then, that will give you lightning Aegis. That's where you'll get that from. So 4 of those are going to be your best bet. Those are pretty rare, not super rare. You'll find them eventually, but they will take you some time to round up 4 of them. And then for the 1x1s, you can really go for anything that your build really needs, but here we have increased stun chance along with necrotic resistance. The reason for that necrotic resistance is so that you don't even have to put it on gear. Between the 2 rings and the idols, your necrotic resistance will be covered. If you're a little shy on elemental resistance, you can also put that here. And then the stun chance, of course, is going to increase the stun chance you have. You already have a lot of stun chance. Shock builds in general, lightning builds, you have a lot of stun chance, just because of the fact they can apply shock so well and do such high damage that the stun chance is already high. So by putting some idols on to increase that stun chance, it's really going to help you stun lock those enemies. For items in this build planner, there are going to be 3 uniques. Now on this build, I'm going to show you guys the two-handed. The gameplay will be with the two-handed setup, just like this. However, there will be other build planners. I'll have them titled what they are. One of them will have a one-hand plus catalyst. One of them will not have Orion's Eye or the chest piece. They'll both be crafted to show you what you can run instead. Orion's Eye is very rare, but remember, if you don't have Orion's Eye, it does suffer the build because 1, you now have to get more mana, 2, you'll have to get void resist, and then 3, you won't get that 15 or up to 15% less fire damage taken, which means that the Ashen Crown converting that physical damage taken as fire isn't going to be as effective, so you may want to stack some physical resistance as well just to reduce the total damage that you take. Alright, for this setup, we do have a two-handed staff. It's going to have critical strike multiplier, increased spell damage, chance to shock, and chance to slow on hit. For our uniques, we're wearing prison wraps. This is going to let you take less elemental damage. And since most stuff is converted at least to fire or into elemental damage category, you have less elemental damage taken from prison wraps, you have less elemental damage taken with flame ward, you have less elemental damage taken when you have or when you are focusing. Now between those and the fact that Orion's Eye gives you 15% or up to 15% less fire damage taken, you can see why it's so effectively tanky, because all that stuff converted into the elemental and all the reduced damage is what makes it to where you can actually take a lot. And then Flame Ward giving you all that ward that you need. There's just lots and lots of protections. Now, Prison Wraps also gives you increased critical strike chance, increased elemental damage, and of course up to 8% of elemental damage leeches health on crit. You'll be critting a lot, you'll be doing a lot of hits, you'll be doing a lot of damage. It's a lot of leech as well, so it is a really good chest piece to have. However, it doesn't give you a whole lot of extra damage, so you can craft a chest. You can get that +1 charge to Flame Ward, so you have an extra charge there. You can get a lot more lightning damage, you can get more shock. We'll go over what a crafted chest will look like as well. Ashen Crown is the helm unique that you will wear. Now the reason for this is it lets you target Elemental Nova. Now this is huge. In almost any build, this is best in slot. You're not really going to want to craft a helm. You can, but Elemental Nova will no longer be targetable, and that just changes the entire build. This also gives you increased stun duration as well as spell stun chance. And then, of course, it converts that up to 80% physical damage taken as fire. Now, if you don't want to run any physical resistance at all, make sure you have at least a 70% plus roll on this, because otherwise you'll be taking a lot of physical damage. If you roll between 40 and 60%, I recommend getting up to at least 50% physical. Get at least one tier 5 on something for that 45% physical resist. And of course, if you have a really bad roll, it's like bare minimum 40 to 45%, you should probably just get all of your physical resist just to make sure that your damage stays down. This also gives you +2 to all attributes. And then Orion's Eye, of course, you convert all of that void damage taken into fire, so you don't have to stack any void resist. You'll take less fire damage. And then, of course, that huge amount of mana, which is just absolutely beneficial to the build because it puts you over that 300 barrier really easy without stacking mana anywhere else. For everything else, I'm just going to hover over them really quick. Again, this build planner will be in the written guide below. There'll also be a link to Foe's build planner. His is going to have all of the same stuff, links to all the build planners. And then I do apologize that whether you click on his or ours, if you do the one-handed version or anything with an offhand, for some reason offhands aren't appearing in build planners. So until that's fixed, you're not going to be seeing those. And that's not covered in this video. But for the catalyst, the basic things that you're just going to want is cast speed, resistances on it if you don't have, or you'd want health on it. And then of course you can go with critical strike multiplier, spell critical strike chance if you wanted, spell damage, lightning damage, all the things that stack and scale with this build. And then for blessings, nothing out of the ordinary. We do have endurance, you have increased health, you have the increased mana, you have your critical strike avoidance from here. Now I only have the unempowered version of critical strike avoidance on my build. If you have the empowered critical strike avoidance, you only have to get 1 tier 5 critical strike avoidance on your gear. If you have the unempowered, you'll have to get 2 tier 5 rules to max it out, as long as you get a good rule on both rings and a decent rule on your blessing. And then we also have the endurance and the endurance threshold, which really helps to not take that one hit or that one shot death. It's going to help guard you against that. Alright, for the character sheet, as you can see, I don't have my void resist, don't have poison, don't have physical, and I'm not quite capped on elemental. But all the gameplay, this is what it'll be based on. You're going to see that you barely take any damage. Now, I will be teleporting once every 8 seconds, and what that's going to allow is for my resistances to be capped. And I'm not worried about the physical, because most of that is being converted into fire. I'm not worried about void, because that's also converted into fire. And then with capped fire resist, reduced elemental damage, and then Orion's Eye giving me reduced fire damage taken, you're really just not going to take any damage. For the rest of our characters sheet, we have about 1900 health, we've got 15% armor, and then for damages, you can see we have just over 600% lightning damage. That's going to go up if you have lightning Aegis. We have 325% critical strike multiplier. For defense, we do have capped critical strike avoidance, and then we have about 34% endurance. Now, you can also cap the endurance. You will want to get to 60% on that to really help you against the one-shots, so that when your damage or when your life gets down to that point where it's activated, in this case 444 health and below, that you'll take 60% less damage, and that just really helps guard against those one-shots. And then for the skill rotation, how to play the build, so Elemental Nova is going to be your main damage dealer. It's going to do the huge AoE, you can target it, go all over the map, and then of course as you attack the same target and apply shock and apply all of those, stuns, spark charges, everything, you'll see your damage skyrockets. And we're hitting the training dummy for about 50 to 60k per tick. That's 5 ticks per second, because that's how often we're casting it. And then of course each one of those is applying the spark charge, which is also doing 5 hits. So you're getting 10 hits per second on enemies in a huge AoE. It's huge, it's massive damage, and it just annihilates, and that's why it's been a very, very popular build. We then also have Lightning Blast. Lightning Blast will be your single target killer. You're able to spam this for a much longer period of time, and then the more you cast it and the faster you cast it, the more chains you're going to get to the same enemy. Now, we don't have a whole lot of critical strike chance with the two-hand version, so not everything will be a crit. It doesn't have the same base crit chance that Elemental Nova has. That has 9% inside its skill tree, which absolutely lets it stack higher. But this is going to be your single target killer. It's going to do much more damage. It's going to allow you to cast it for a much longer period of time because it doesn't consume as much mana, and it's just going to do more damage faster or more damage per second than Elemental Nova would against single targets. Now, the other thing to notice about Elemental Nova versus Lightning Blast is that the Lightning Blast is going to give you that Lightning Aegis, which means you're even more tanky while casting it than if you were just to spam Elemental Nova. Now, our other skills, we have Focus. When you do start running out of mana, you just focus for a second, get that burst, and then go ahead and get out of it. For Flame Ward, you'll have that multiple stacks of it. I've got 2 here. If you do craft a chest, you can get a 3rd charge of it if you'd want. And of course, when you take damage or you notice your life is dropping, you just spam one of those. It'll give you some ward. It's going to give you that reduced elemental damage taken. It's going to be absolutely beneficial for the build. And then of course, just make sure you're teleporting once every 8 seconds to cap out those elemental resistances. If you have capped elemental resist, you don't need to teleport to get it, then you'll be fine. You don't have to teleport once every 8 seconds. But here, I'm using it to get that last few percentage from my resistance. I just want to make sure that I'm teleporting once every 8 seconds, or, every time it comes off cooldown, which usually you are. Usually by that time you need to dodge something, or you're moving through an echo, you want to go faster. You're going to be teleporting often. Alright, that's going to be it for this build guide. Again, this is Foe's Nova Boy. There's going to be all of the different build planners for the different ways to build it inside of the written guide. There's going to be links to his written guide. Be sure to check it out. I think he has videos inside of there, at least short clips, so you can check those out to see the gameplay from the different versions. And then of course there'll be some gameplay here from the way that I've played it through the echoes. Alright, travelers, that's going to be it for this build guide. Hope you enjoyed it, and as always, stay safe, travelers, and enjoy some gameplay.